Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 196 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sara.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Full.
Yeah.
Dinner was good. It hit the spot just right. I didn't know what I wanted until the last minute, but I am glad I got what I got.
I'm glad you got what you got, too, because I was being super indecisive, and I was just like, yeah, that sounds good.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I just copied you entirely, and I was not disappointed.
So,
We had your game last week.
well, before we even get into that, because I think that's actually more on topic than anything else,
Okay.
D&D, the OGL, Creative Commons, all this shit happened.
What did we tell you? It was going to change immediately. It changed immediately as we got off the air because we'd reported some of the rumors from D&D Shorts, I think it was.
That day.
Yeah, like, as we were logging off, he was retracting some of the rumors, but then kind of went back when some other people also
Chimed
kind of
in,
confirmed them.
Yeah.
So there was some things up in the air with that, but then things happened, more things happened, and then kind of we won.
Yeah, everybody won.
You're going to hear a lot of people say they won. We all won.
Yeah, I think this is very much like the tank girl. I won. Say it. Say I won. I won. No, say I won. I won.
Yeah.
No, but and what's funny is that everyone agrees that it felt hasty.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you look at what they left open on the table within the Creative Commons, and it was like, oopsie. Because there's things that are, right there now.
There's things that, in there, what, mind flares and aboleths and beholders.
Because they left the whole
that?
aberration list in there. They didn't just say, aberrations are X, and not told you any names, didn't name it. No, they named it.
Right.
So by naming it, now that's Creative Commons. It's
Yeah.
there. You just put it out there.
Huh.
So, you don't know if it was someone who was just like, get this out as quickly as possible. We need to get this behind us. Are you sure, sir? Yes. Are you sure, sir? Just do it.
Just
okay,
hit send.
And there we go. Copy, pasted, done.
Yeah. I saw somebody call it one of the best cases of malicious compliance they've ever seen.
If it was that.
If it was that.
If it was that.
Yeah.
And now, we have the full, almost turn back, if you will, where 1.0A is 100% staying as it is, indefinite. We have Creative Commons on the SRD, so pretty much anyone can grab that. So if you use both in conjunction, you can just do what you want to do, which is great. I mean, that's what everybody wanted in the first place. It leaves some open questions about, 1D&D, what's going to happen there, whether that's going to be under a different license control, which I would expect it to be. Because it's not going to be the same SRD. We know that.
Sure.
The rules are going to change. There's going to be some adjustments. Nothing sweeping, but enough that it makes an adjustment because we see that with every version that happens. But not only that, but now they're trying to get trust back in the community. And this is me throwing my 10% out there of what I future view on this. And that is I have a funny feeling that we're going to see Wizards of the Coast taking a separation from Hasbro. They're going to let Hasbro fall on a sword and make statements like, hey, we're trying to do our best over here, but we were getting pressure, and we didn't have choices, which is why they're having the president of D&D, the executive vice president of producer of D&D, on with Ginny D. Now, I think that's an interesting choice. Of all of the people they could have chose, they chose someone who had a decent following. Don't get me wrong. She has got a good following.
Yeah, but
she is not the predominant, I would have picked a lot of other people who support D&D to an nth degree.
Yeah, real talk. She's a cosplayer and performer that became a fan of D&D
and has been behind it.
And has leveraged her existing fan base to talk a little bit about D&D and stuff like that.
But she hits the right target group to try and buy back trust from, which is a younger crowd.
Yeah.
They're going after the critters, because the critters follow her.
Absolutely.
So they're hitting the right, I guess, group of the culture, within the culture.
Yeah, sure.
And so I will not fault for what they're doing. Ginny D's doing the one thing that she does best. I don't know anything about that. I don't know what I don't know. What questions should I ask?
Sure.
And put that out on Twitter. By all means, go up there and add your questions. do not hate on someone in our community who
no.
is flagging and has got an ear.
Absolutely no hate on Jenny D whatsoever.
Never.
Absolutely none.
Like, just like us. Like, I will flat out say it. We are nobodies in this community.
Mm-hmm.
We have a meager following in comparison to even Ginny, but again, we don't show our faces.
Sure.
We don't do cute videos every 2 days, and neither of us cosplay to any relative mean.
Yeah.
So, like, this is us talking to the world saying, please be kind. She is doing the best she can, and she asks for help all the time to some very successful people who have been doing this like we have for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And learns. She learned about burnout in her own game. She learned about what she's been doing wrong, and she's very quick to come back to it and explain that to the community. I hope this is another learning experience that she can express through and help D&D. I think it will be good all around, but I think it's interesting their choices they're making.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, I pay attention to this stuff because obviously I need to for the podcast and whatnot. It's always good to keep abreast on the situation in the community and whatnot, especially in the TTRPG's arguably flagship game.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, for me the interesting question is, does this make things right? You know, and I think we all need to decide that on an individual basis.
Oh, without
a
doubt.
How wounded are we? I am very much in the once bitten, twice shy camp. I think that, attempted murder is a crime for a reason. That it doesn't actually matter if you committed the crime. The intent to commit the crime is a large part of that. And they attempted to destroy a large part of our hobby and destroy a game and monetize it and turn it all against us. And for me, that's a nail in the coffin, whether they walked it back 2 weeks later or not.
So
it shows what they're capable of. It shows what their priorities are, and that a lot of the only reason that they did walk it back was because they started losing money hand over fist from D&D Beyond subscriptions. Now, I will say that is solely my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I am in no way implying anybody needs to share that opinion. By all means, if this fixes stuff for you and you go back to D&D, more power to you. I hope you have great games.
Or continue at least with D&D Beyond and the product system and the products itself.
Sure.
Like, keep playing D&D by all means.
Look, the most important thing for me is people have good games at good tables with their friends and tell good stories and stuff like that.
I think for me, and I'm not saying this because I feel like I'm going to go running back to D&D like an ex girlfriend or something like that. But for me, like, I've been in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
I know corporate ownership. I know what pressure from upper executive and finance can mean to pretty much any project. And there's nothing to say that people weren't getting pushed around and that there weren't possible shifts in management control from Hasbro's side and from effectively the board of directors / finance control.
Sure.
That forced the hands of a lot of people who didn't want to be forced, and that could have been a long time coming. In just a series of events that led from this summer, which we kind of saw all the way out to this point where it was like, okay, you guys are killing this. No, we're not. We're going to make this is the way things need to be. You guys needed to run this as a business like it used to be ran. And like, this has been running like a business. What the hell are you talking? We're doing fine financially. You guys needed us. Now you want us. This is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And it all turning around on their head while people basically crossed their arms at Wizards and went, okay, what would you like us to do next? Well, you should put out an announcement. You didn't tell us to. Well, we're bleeding money. Oh, we are?
Sounds like a you problem, not an us problem. We're just following orders.
I just followed this memo right here that you sent me that said, screw our fan base. That's very funny. I guess I'll just sit here and continue taking my check.
I mean, like that. That's all fine, but the Nuremberg defense does not necessarily cover it for me.
Well,
because Hasbro is still there,
right,
and can still pull some BS at any given time once they decide this bed of coals has cooled off enough for them to try again. So,
and that's where I think the next year of trust rebuild is going to be very hard for Wizards,
and that's why I'm once bitten, twice shy. That's just simply because nothing. Yes, they've walked it back. Yes, we're arguably in a better place than we were, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But nothing says that can't happen again in the future in some sort of iteration,
Is the next Sonic the Hedgehog gonna look like crap? Possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the same kind of situation. Is how quickly did they turn that around?
But see, this is why I'm a pessimist, right? This is why I'm a doomsayer, because if things turn out bad, then I'm right, and I'm not surprised or blindsided by any of this stuff.
That's
and if
fair.
things turn out great, everything's better than expected, and I'm pleasantly surprised.
Fair enough.
You
Fair
know,
enough. Get some
nothing-
honey for your
Nothing sneaks up
for your
on me.
tea,
For my
so I'm
tea.
ready to go here.
All right.
And I will talk about my game.
Yeah, we have talked like 10 minutes already.
Whatever.
about-
This is our show.
It's true. It's true.
As I said, we're not here for the money.
How'd your game go this weekend?
Overall, I will say better than I expected because I was not in the right mind frame coming up to it. I felt
You dragged yourself to that table.
Yeah, and the thing was that like the good news was it was part 2 or technically part 3 of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So all the players were in motion, all the pieces were there. All I had to do was reconfigure a little bit based upon what you guys discussed with me in the previous session. Like at the end of the previous session, we did our recap. I got the feeling of what you guys wanted. So I was like, okay, I am just going to filter through that information and say, okay, what adjustments do I need to make? How do I need to, move my way through this? And so I did that. I took the time to say, okay, well, I know you guys want to split the party. That was your decision to make at that time, and create this, like, 2-part attack where basically your specific character would kind of be in 2 places at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
To confuse the big bad guy that you've been looking to kick the ass of.
Yeah, we have a rogue assassin with a disguise kit, so...
Who did amazingly well.
Let's do it.
And that whole situation could have gone any number of ways, and they literally handled it professionally, quickly, and got in and out.
Yeah.
Like, it was the cleanest op that I had seen. I had given them plenty of opportunities to do it different ways, and things that could have gone sideways, and that just, it went flawless, right? And put them in a safe position. So then it was left to the mage, or the two mages and the fighter to go get the other 2 individuals back, who were at the said bad guy's house, who wasn't there because of balls set in motion. So it allowed you guys to step in, have some good fights, and create your own exit strategy of how you were going to get out of there. But it ended in a way that I kind of anticipated, which was that you guys would exit and maybe do a comeback kind of a situation. Except you decided at the very last second not to take your own teleport.
Yep.
To walk away from the portal and have the fighter join you because he wasn't going to leave you behind.
Well, that was his choice.
Right, but that was the thing.
I told him to go through the portal, and he
Right.
was like, "Not leaving you."
Right, and so you just closed the portal, and now you guys are there.
Job wasn't done.
Right, so not only was the party split, but you guys split it again at the very end.
Yeah.
So, from my perspective at that point, I had realized that I had 2 players who had basically had very little gameplay. I gave them little bits of narrative gameplay so that they were part of the story and could prepare for when you guys arrived and be readied for whatever was to come through, because they were expecting you. And now I have an extended section because they have no idea.
Yeah, they're on the receiving end of my portal, so they see that open up. They see the 2 people that we went to rescue, and they see the party, one of the party's wizards come through, and then the portal just closes.
Yep.
And the half-orc warrior and the other wizard
don't make
nowhere to be found.
So it was my choice then at the end of that to have you guys show up here on Friday in 2 days to just close that loop of the story.
Yeah.
And keep it separate from the other players. Now, I invited them. If anybody else wanted to come on Friday, they could show up on Friday and watch the show. Vicky's going to be there. But the whole point was that I wanted you guys to be able to close that loop, and we could decide, based on where that ends, how the next leg of the adventure goes. Because really, we're in a scene shift, right? This is a movement at this point, but at the same time, I don't want to stop roleplay.
Sure.
If the roleplay moment is there, any number of ways, everything from like the fighter carrying your lifeless body through a portal, or months later showing up somewhere and reconnecting with the group.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that could happen. He can't teleport.
No, he can't.
So,
I'm his ticket home.
Correct. You know, or worse, you coming back without him.
Yeah.
You know, and what that means. So there's all kinds of events that could transpose. A message spell, you know, of just, I'm sorry.
I don't even have it. I don't have sending.
Right. I mean, it doesn't say that it was you. So.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's so many little elements that could happen, and I'm excited for all of them for the story's sake.
Yeah.
And where we are within the story. So, but funny that we're doing a show about splitting the party, and literally splitting happened.
Right.
And like happened hard.
And a big split. Yeah.
A huge split. So, coming up to this part to this, I did the funny thing. I went on Reddit and I put in, not even like in, you know, DM Academy or RPG, literally Reddit, splitting the party. That's all I put in and searched.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny how almost every other thread was a reverse, back and forth.
Splitting the party is awful. Splitting the party's fine, actually.
You don't know how to split. Yeah.
Splitting the party's the best thing I ever did.
You don't know how to split the party. Splitting the party can be easy if you just follow these steps. You know,
Yeah.
Like, but everybody was going back and forth about you're doing it wrong, regardless of how you're doing it.
Yep.
You know, but all of them had common comments. All of them. Like, even the ones that were, you know, this is how to do it right,
Mm-hmm.
all seemed to follow the same thing and always pretty much had the same common issues.
Yeah.
And I was like, at least in my mind frame coming up to this show is just like, you know, I think I know everything I need to know about splitting the party and handling it the proper way. What could I possibly learn by shoveling through the internet's, you know, scum bucket and filtering it to find out what's actually there? And went, huh, I do know quite a bit about this after all these years.
Like, actually, I've had all these ideas.
Yeah. I mean, there were a few things that I thought were really good explanations, some very funny commentary.
Yeah.
But one interesting point from the OSR community kept coming back around.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times it was, it just felt so, I don't know, I guess aggressive.
Yeah.
That, like,
Yeah.
DMs are just doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You know? So let's talk a bit about not, you know, don't split the party as a mantra.
Yes, age old mantra. Like, I think anybody who's had any sort of experience with Dungeons and Dragons has heard this at least once. Don't split the party. Never split the party. And so we're kind of here to disassemble that and just talk a little bit about, like, should you do it? Can you do it? How do you do it without things going to crap, both in character and out of character?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things of the idea of divide is divide and conquer, but often in games, especially with a lot of mechanical components like D&D or even some of the OSR games, divide meant you were getting rid of your own resources and you were the one being conquered.
Well, yeah, no, so, I mean, you divide and conquer is a great strategy for defeating an enemy, so if you do the dividing for them,
yeah,
all they have to do left is conquer.
Yeah.
You know? And that's really where the whole don't split the party thing happens, because you take the healer away from the mage, you take the mage away from the warrior, you know?
You know, and Hands Across America did teach us when we were kids, together we stand, divided we fall.
Well, exactly.
And if you're old enough to know that song ringing in your head right now, you can still keep playing D&D.
I think I do. So, yeah, I mean, what can go wrong there? You've got a lack of synergy and resources. You know, your party isn't together to work together. A lot of times it's because the healer's gone. Honestly, it's whichever team doesn't have the healer is going to die.
I mean, there's a lot of... I mean, at the same time, you've got crowd control is a thing.
Oh, sure.
You know, but those are situational.
There's a dozen ways it could fall apart. I'm just pontificating on it, especially since it did come from D&D. You've got certain ingrained mechanics, you know. The other big thing is, like, I think this is probably the OSR comment you were referring to earlier, is that storytellers who don't adjust their encounters for a split party can and do wipe groups easily.
And there were so many people posting, like, oh, you're not a good DM if you change your encounters after the fact. Like, that doesn't happen realistically. Like, those monsters will be there regardless of if it's 2 or 4 of them.
Right. And so we have it's good that that comic gets made because it illustrates a separation in storytelling styles between more narrative, more hey everybody, we're just trying to have fun style gameplay that Rob and I prefer, and that we try to encourage here on Storyteller Conclave. And like OSR, hardcore, you're gonna make it through this dungeon on your own blood, sweat, and tears. You know, if I have to drag you kicking and screaming through it, or maybe you'll die, and if you die, that's
get
your
another
own
character,
dumb fault,
start
you
it
know?
over.
Rub some dirt in it and roll up a new character. And I'm just not into that. But there is the OSR community is out there. They are valid. They are having fun. We're not here to tell them not to have fun.
No.
But for the style of gameplay that we at Storyteller Conclave prefer and are trying to teach...
It's in our name. It's in our name.
Yeah, we're Storyteller Conclave, not Dungeon Grind, Conquest.
That's totally
Conclave.
different podcast. Go listen to it. It's got heavy metal.
Right.
And we love those people. They deserve to be part of Tabletop. We are not saying that that is not valid. Heckin' valid. Ooh.
But, disclaimers aside, though, the people who do that don't know what quantum ogres are.
No.
We've talked about them here before. We will get a little bit into it, but essentially, we'll get into a little more in detail. We've talked about it on the show before, but it's basically moving and or changing your encounters as the narrative needs it to be. So nothing is set in stone. Those ogres are in a quantum state. They don't need to be in that room. They don't need to be in the number they are. They don't even need to be ogres.
They can be anything you need them to be.
And then one of the big things that can go wrong, and this is not an in-character thing, this is an out-of-character thing, is, obviously players become bored doing nothing for long periods of time.
Yeah, especially if, like, half of your group is the tactical group, and the other half is the talky group. And you split it that way. Like a party scene where one group is going in and doing the espionage break-in thing, and the other group is literally out in the ballroom hobnobbing.
Something we have done not once but twice. If I had a nickel for every time you guys didn't use that plan, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Correct. But the point is that, like, a lot of times when you get to the tactical section, things slow down to a crawl, and you kind of stop listening because you're not involved.
Yeah.
You're not in the combat. Why are you even caring?
It's a lot it's slow and it's crunchy in a lot of game systems, D&D especially, and it's a little bit like watching somebody take a math test for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you're counting squares, you're measuring distances, you're rolling dice and adding numbers, and it's, I rolled a 15 to hit, I do 35 damage, okay, let me do some quick subtraction here, let me do some reverse math.
And it's not even like waiting for the NASCAR accident to happen, right? But effectively, that's what it is. The only time of excitement is when something terrible happens, and everybody at the table goes, "Oh God, what just happened? Oh
yeah.
Lord!" And then it has to be explained.
Natural
to them.
20. Oh, suddenly I'm paying attention for the next 15 seconds. Cool. That was a lot of damage. Okay,
and
back to scrolling
you could say
my phone.
People should be more involve more RP in their fighting. Sure, but not everyone's capable of that.
Sure.
Not everyone is going to be flamboyant and descriptive of how they're cleaving or firing off spells or explaining their actions in some narrative way.
And arguably, that prolongs combat.
Without a doubt.
And so, if your goal is to just get through this quickly so that you can get to also tending to the other group and giving them equal time, the more description you throw into it, the longer everything's just going to take, and you're almost delaying the inevitable. So, and we did see you pulled a great quote from Reddit. Unfortunately, I don't know, we didn't have a posting attribution there, but it was, even if you balance time perfectly, each player only has half the time to contribute to the scene.
Exactly. And they know that. They feel that.
Yeah.
Like, even the best chads at your table are going to balance their time against the other people at the table.
Yeah.
And that's half. It's going to be half.
Yeah.
Not even like they get their full time because they're not in the room.
And I think as storytellers, we're very conscious of that. I know you are, and I know I am. oh God, I felt really bad about, how today went, because I feel like, X player and Y player didn't get any time to do anything tonight.
Yep.
And in spite of them looking in the eye at the, and doing what we're doing, Roses and Thorns, they looked me in the eye and said, I had a great time today. I don't care that I only got to play for, an hour out of our 5 hours together.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you always think about, like, what can I do in the next adventure segment to bring them back into the light?
Right.
But that's not always up to you, because they may not step out, even if you write it properly.
Yep.
It's up to them.
So you can split the party, and maybe you should, if you keep certain concerns in mind.
And this was pretty much the universal statements that everybody was making.
Yeah.
New and old storytellers alike.
So first off, splitting the party is typically a tactically bad thing to do, but not so bad narratively.
No, I think it almost shines better narratively.
I've got some personal experiences I will be sharing a little bit towards the end of this section here, but narrative games have a lot lower lethal consequences most of the time, so, whereas, in fact, it was kind of funny, Knox in the Box in our live chat actually posted a gif of some Scooby-Doo characters talking about splitting the party. Let's split up, gang! And 5 minutes later, they're like, what'd you expect was going to happen? Not a TPK!
Yeah.
You always hear that's going to be, if we split the party, we're all going to die. Well, what if death isn't a consequence that's really on the table?
And realistically, in D&D, it's not.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it's not.
It's
D&D,
not.
But
there's all kinds of ways to get around it. At the same time, it's the thing that's sitting in your head every time you play D&D.
Yep.
It's either a 100% chance or pretty much never.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the two things. And there's no middle ground there, which is really odd for a system that has a set of hit points that go from 0 up constantly.
Yeah.
And only get bigger. So when you have narrative scenes that give you consequences and solutions versus death or life, you as a group can feel more available to communicate your scenes and involve them.
And usually, both your consequences and your solutions are going to lead to story advancement one way or another.
Yeah, it's not going to be... The inevitable conclusion isn't, oh, I failed, everyone pulls guns now, and everything slows down to bullet time.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's more like Ocean's 11, where you've got 13 people doing different things, each getting 30 to 60 seconds to explain what they're doing, make a quick roll, and go, oh yeah, okay, it worked. Uh-oh. Or, that was stupendous, and something happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's your 3 options. It's really easy. It feels good, in fact, and kind of comical, and allows people a lot more expression about what they're doing.
Exactly.
This kind of steps back into that narrative aspect of Quantum Ogres, in the sense that because you're no longer putting immediate death on the table, it's not so much for balance, but for flow control, right? You can allow things to get readjusted. And it's the whole concept, and the one quote we pulled where somebody made the statement that splitting the party is very bad because only a good DM would never readjust the encounter to fit the party.
Right.
I think that's a load of turds.
Yeah, it really is. Again, if you're not playing an OSR-style game, I kind of get it if you're playing OSR. One of the big reasons I don't personally enjoy OSR is because that's the mentality of, like, there's ogres in this room, deal with it,
Yeah, it is very much not a story-based game at that point. It is just a run through whatever and run that whatever with your sword.
But, I mean, keeping in mind that, I play with the Heroes Never Die special rule in my Savage Worlds game, where, death isn't even an option unless the player agrees to it. So, I mean, already right there, what am I going to threaten you guys with?
A bad time.
Consequences. A bad time. Yeah. I've got to be a lot more creative. It doesn't matter if I pare down the ogres in the room because the interesting thing isn't going to be an ogre pounding your flesh into paste. It's going to be where does the story go because of what's in that room?
Right.
You know?
So now that we've basically thrown out the concept of balance and fairness within the fight, we have to focus on the elements that really are the point, which is what we talked about. When you get to something tactical, the point is attention. Keeping the attention of the players to their characters and within the story.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure that all parts, be it split in the party equal halves, get equal time so that nobody feels like they're not participating. You know, it's the meanwhiles that bounce back and forth between them. In my game, I had both of you guys going back and forth, adjusting the timing, seeing when things were going to fall into place, and then the one group decided, like, well, we haven't heard from them, but it is our opportunity to go, so we're going to go.
Yeah.
And, like, whoop, you make it back.
Yep.
Okay? They threw in a few elements for me, which was great, and allowed me to have a little extra role play with them, and bounce some of that role play story back and forth a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to you guys, I made it a point that you guys were going to be advancing into the story, and then suddenly, like, I had an idea that there was going to be these skill checks kind of that would bring you up to the point where an encounter could happen and you guys would alert them and the event would occur. But once their event was over, it was like, okay, well, I don't need to do that now. Now I just need to focus on moving you guys through the tactical in such a way that it feels exciting and tense.
Yep.
And so instead of worrying about every little thing, I only worried about the points of, have you been detected? What could get you detected?
Mm-hmm.
And played with what was in the space.
Sure.
So keeping the attention of the other party members to your story was part of the interest there. And doing the dramatic cutaways, like opening the first door with brute force because you didn't have a rogue with you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and like easing your way in and deciding how you were going to step into that first situation and where you were going to go once you were inside the door.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then cutting away immediately, like to the other group. Okay, you guys are comfortable. You're getting some things set up. You're setting out a banquet, and things like that. Well, meanwhile, cutting back, like, all right, you guys have made your way up these staircases, another doorway in front of you, and it leads to an empty room. But this empty room has X. Oh, okay, and like gets you a feeling for what kind of space you're in, where you're at. Like, we need to find this little girl, and that tension step to finding her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that I deliberately did was I had picked carefully and set up the situation for you guys and kind of made a mistake. I had given you guys images of where my character was, and I think this fits into the attention, was the other players were remembering details of visions that happened 5 adventures ago.
Yeah.
And so now
we have a diviner wizard. We've actually gotten eyes inside that place a couple times.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that player. It was everyone at the table pulling elements together.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to keep this like, I could have put that child anywhere in that space.
Right.
But instead, now I deliberately had to make sure, because you guys were looking carefully at the layout to figure out what room she would be in.
Sure.
And so I had to keep that. So I had to have one quantum ogre in a specific place, but to keep the attention and the detail.
Right.
And that's one of the things that you have to add in that suspense element, is if you have everyone's attention because they're feeding into it, keep that element a little bit lit and hold them. And it works. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say for me, switching over to Savage Worlds actually made splitting the party a lot easier for me. It was remarkable the night and day shift it was that it made for my storytelling. And so I kind of wanted to share a little bit about why that difference took place now that I've played Savage Worlds for a little over a year now, I think.
Yeah.
We've gotten several game sessions in with it, and we can kind of stress test it, So for me, like, first off, it was a big shift from tactical to narrative. The main reason we switched over to Savage Worlds was because it felt like every situation in Dungeons and Dragons was just, how do I turn this into a tactical battle?
Right.
Or more accurately, probably, what shenanigans can I pull to keep it from folding into a tactical battle?
Yeah.
And will that be any fun? because 90% of the rules are about how to do tactical battles, and everything else feels like window dressing. You know?
And what was interesting and kind of in a layered comment with that is that even at my table, I was saying that I was having, like, I was talking to everyone about, like, well, I know how hard this was to, you know, and some of the concepts I have in the future of making, of how I can keep D&D exciting when moments like this happened. You know, short of not playing D&D, and everyone at the table went, like, we don't have to play D&D, we don't have to follow those rules.
Yeah.
And that is the truth, is that you don't. Once you step into narrative, you kind of have carte blanche. D&D doesn't say that you can't do something.
Yeah, it just says, if this situation unfolds, here's some rules you can use to adjudicate it.
Exactly. And Savage Worlds kind of helps you adjudicate whatever you need to.
Yeah, it's the great thing that I liked about Savage Worlds was that it really puts it out there as, like, combat is a thing you can do, and when it happens, here's how you handle it.
Yeah.
But, like, it still kind of follows a lot of the same structure as a lot of the other things, and so you can absolutely handle it as just a dramatic task, if you want, and make fighting rolls, and if they fail them, they take a wound, you know? Sort of things.
We had something recently that this triggered real quick, and I'm sorry to step off it, but it was in our thread, I think it was in our links, the screenshot of a section of book that had a very visceral description of basically, like, pulling a gun and shooting somebody.
Technolich posted it.
Yeah.
It was, I forgot what game system it was, but yeah, it had this real visceral description of like, how violent and awful combat was. And then at the end of it, they were like, but, you know, if you still want to, here's how you can do it.
But it's like, here's all the other things you can do. Walk away. Negotiate. Give up something.
Yeah.
And it literally,
surrender.
It presents the players other ways to think about something other than a video game.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does at the very end say, but if you really do want to shoot somebody, here are the rules to shooting somebody.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's kind of like throwing the back, and I feel Savage World has that feeling.
It kind of does. I mean, first off, like the whole Heroes Never Die thing for me was a great move because it lowers the stakes of combat, and therefore it kind of I don't know, almost disincentivizes it in a sense, in that there's lower stakes for it. You know, I don't know. I don't
think
really...
it's necessarily that it's lower stakes, because, like, it is fast, furious fun.
Yeah.
And I think the furious part really weighs. That if you want to get in, it's basically telling you, we're not saying this isn't milsim. But what we are saying is that we've geared this to feel like it should when you get furious.
Yeah, yeah.
That things happen. And they happen quickly.
They happen quickly, yeah.
And that's the key to this, is that if you really tear it down to its combat section, it feels OSR. In its, if you want to get into combat, the mechanics are there to basically make you feel like you may need a new character or a new set of pants.
Oh, it does. That's one of the biggest criticisms is it's very spiky and very lethal because of it. You know?
But the point is that you shouldn't. And it's trying to teach you that.
Yeah.
The system is very much teaching that in a narrative sense. And I like that. I like that very much.
Well, the big thing for me, I think, was the shift from, first off, Benny's, from leaning into your hindrances. Yes. I think enhanced RP a lot. You know,
yes, I agree.
Instead of always looking for the most optimal way to play your character, because, you know, losing that might mean death. You know, so you never want to be greedy or self-sacrificial or mean or whatever. You're always looking, your survival of your character is always on your mind. Well, in Savage Worlds, like, if you play a hindrance, you get a Benny out of it. There's a, you know, maybe I do want to tell this guy to F off because it says that I'm mean and arrogant on my sheet, you know?
Yeah. Or maybe I don't want to catch up with this guy because I'm old.
Yeah, exactly. let him get away, but I'll take a Benny for it.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Combine that then when you've got a classless system, okay? You've got no character classes, and therefore you can make a lot better rounded characters, not being pigeonholed into, you are the big dumb fighter, you know?
Yeah.
And then a lot for more well-rounded characters allows you to be competent in more areas than your class would have allowed, okay? One of the very first things you did when we switched over to Savage Worlds, you're like, I'm the cleric, I want to go see the Thieves Guild. Oh, okay. typically that would be the rogue's job if we were still playing D&D. But sure, you're just a dude now. Let's go see the Thieves Guild, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I might take somebody else with me because it's a smart thing to do.
Sure, someone who knows the lay of the land down there, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, but the fact was, you felt confident to do that. Our fighter, our quote-unquote big, dumb fighter, took the fame edge. Because he wanted to be a local hero for all the philanthropy and work that he does with, like, the blue-collar dudes, you know? And so I see my players branching out into a lot of different areas and being a lot more comfortable just role-playing, you know? And just having fun. Instead of thinking, like, I'm the fighter, what does the fighter do?
Right.
Now they're conceiving of themselves as an actual, like, person in the world, rather than just a job description.
So here's where I think we can step into the next frame, and that is that once your players stop feeling like a role and start playing who they are, role-playing, metagaming kind of slides in. And that is that your players, and by extension their characters, care about each other. They get to know each other.
Yes.
They start doing fun things together and getting those little kibitz moments. This means that they are together. They are a unit. And in that, even separated, they communicate. Now, I'm not saying that they're using radios and asking for assistance and things like that. I am literally thinking about the person who's hiding behind the wall, wishing that their friend was there going, okay, what would they tell me to do right now? How should I handle this? And the little angel pops on one shoulder and says, stay behind cover, don't peek your head out, make your way to the exit. Meanwhile, the other person pops up and it's the tiny fighter going, mess them up! And at the table, that's what they're telling you. That's what the player sitting across from you is shouting at you. It's like, dude, you got this. Go get him. Just go tear him down, you know?
Yeah, for me, table talk is always, like, a lot of people decry it as metagaming. I don't think it is.
No.
Like, I really think that, like, table talk is one of those great things in a game, because first off, it keeps everybody at the table involved, but second off, it really, like, you always have to remember that, like, your character is a real person who lives in this world 24/7.
Not you, who literally does it once a week, once a month.
Once a week, once a month, has a lot of other things in your mind, and you only do it for a couple hours at a time, and only so well if you didn't remember to eat a valid lunch that morning, that afternoon, or whatever,
Right.
All sorts of things that can just break your ability to stay in that character and be fully immersed in the fiction. So, like, having somebody give you a good idea from across the table,
or just remind you.
Yeah. Exactly. And the other thing, too, is, like, we used to play, Aberrant.
Yeah.
And in Aberrant, you've got mega intellectual characters.
Yeah.
Literally, mega intelligence is a stat, And to envision that, it's literally the mega stat that goes, like, the analog to mega strength, which is, like, I pick up a car and throw it at you.
Right.
Okay, now imagine that on an intellectual level.
Right.
Okay? Albert Einstein, moron. A simpleton. Could barely tie his own shoes compared to what you can do with Mega Intelligence 1.
Fascinating.
How do you roleplay that?
Yeah.
Technically, you, like...
Well, you don't go into land war with China.
Well, yeah, you never engage in a land war in Asia, but only second to that is never play a Mega Intelligence character if you can't roleplay it, Nobody can. You physically cannot think like a Mega Intelligent character.
No.
So, honestly, my house rule is... just everybody at the table. Just give them ideas.
Yeah.
Because it makes having 5 minds all contributing to the possibilities that person can explore is the only way I can think to even come close to simulating the mental agility that somebody like that would have. You know?
I say the same for combat masters. Like, you're not a combat master, more than likely. Like, we have the rare occasion that literally at your table, the fighter has done some fighting physically. Like, he's gone sword and board, he's used axes and clubs and things like that in the past. But across from him is a dude who literally studied multiple martial arts, weapons training, and actively fights in longsword competition kind of stuff. So, just having someone else sitting there going, hey, you could do this, is that fighter going, oh yeah, like in that 1/8 of a second.
Right.
In their mind.
Right.
And that's, again, that's that meta stretching through, that those thoughts of that character kind of pulling through.
Yeah,
either
absolutely.
through prior memories or things like that, but it's helping the table, and yes, very much so, keeping everybody engaged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and this is the part that kind of gets me, is that everyone in Reddit said that the reason why parties die is the boredom and the split of attention. So it's either you die by not having anyone engaged and forcing them to death, by keeping all of the things in your rule set and your dungeon the way it is, or by literally having the boredom kill the table into oblivion. Now, I read some funny other ways to cover it, but I don't agree with any of them. For instance, one person stated, "Oh, I literally just tell the two players who are not there to go play on the Switch for a while so they don't know what's going on."
What?
Go play another game was their idea. It was to literally just remove them from the equation.
Thank you for showing up to my role-playing game today. For your part in it, you're not going to be playing the role-playing game today.
Exactly. And another person said, every time I've ever split the party, basically everyone goes to their phones.
Yeah.
Except the one person that I'm talking to, who may be part of a group. And I'm like, okay, your group is doing something wrong then. You've lost engagement well before the party split.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So the question then remains is, how do you bring that back into the fold based on what we've got? And we kind of addressed it in the sense that you need to keep the parties interacting. And I think one of the best ways to do this, and it's hard, it's very hard,
yeah, sure,
is that during the active interaction that they're doing, add components that play off the other team's work efforts.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of crew stories work like this, by which I mean like Leverage, Ocean's 11, teams working all in concert. I know one of our questions, a little spoiler alert for our question section, mentions Shadowrun, very much in like that's a crew game.
Yeah.
You assemble a crew to do the job.
Yep. It's roles, but in a different way. Your people fill a role, not based on necessarily their direct abilities that they're going to fill every time. They're filling a role within the events that are about to transpire that are going to bounce off each other.
We need a pickpocket to pickpocket this thing, who gives it to the grifter, who will pass it off as another thing,
right?
Who will sneak it into the vault, where our lock breaker will, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
All while the security expert has disabled and or remapped things to hide our trail the entire way.
Exactly. While our face keeps the VIP distracted and doesn't notice any of this is going on under his nose.
Yeah. Until the last second when they get the item in their hand that they can then present.
Right.
As if it was always there in the vault.
Exactly. So, what is the face doing while the pickpocket's doing their job? Well, hopefully listening intently and enjoying the story.
Right.
But it is an instance where you've split the party. In fact, you split the party in multiple different places there. Everybody's doing their own independent job.
But everybody's dependent on each other.
Exactly. So the success of the pickpocket denotes how easily the grifter is going to have their job, and then that is going to determine what the face is doing. Yeah, it's a passing the baton sort of thing.
Yep. I love that. Again, exceptionally hard to do, but you have to change failure to consequences in your mind frame at every time.
Yes. The big thing is that you want to reduce, however you end up implementing this. Okay. Your goal is to reduce the sense that any one party is idle while the other is active.
Yeah.
Okay. Even if they're just listening intently and not actually doing anything, not rolling dice, not making decisions, it's still important for a crew that is working in concert to listen to what happened to the other team so that they have information to act upon.
And I'm going to say that be careful within this, that you force them to listen. It is not a forced listen. It's you want to make sure that their attention is there. People have a hard time envisioning things.
Sure.
Especially when someone else is doing it and it's in their mind's eye, not this other player's. So sometimes one of the best things you can do as the storyteller is reiterate the story. Change the perspective ever so slightly to the event versus the person doing the event. Show the perspective of what something else is seen, the way that's being seen, maybe by in general.
Yeah.
So that the next person is there to be able to pick that up and move on with it, and can ask the questions of like, did I miss something? Did this just happen? Kind of a step.
No, and I want to go back to what you said earlier about like having the other party leave the room and go do something else so that they won't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I used to kind of be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, you really want to like, have that illusion that like you really would have no idea, and I want your reactions to be authentic and raw and stuff like that. But like, I've really come around full circle on that one.
Right.
And I think what actually changed my mind on that was Matt Mercer.
Yeah.
Early on, I want to say in campaign 2.
Sure. Okay.
There were a couple like dream sequences where he had everyone except for one character get up from the table and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had this dream sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this a couple times, and he was asked in one interview about that and like why he did that or how he felt that went or something. And his answer was essentially like, if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't have had people leave.
Yeah.
Because they're all players in this game, and whereas, yeah, okay, they wouldn't know it actually happened, I trust my players not to pull that information into their characters. And I've essentially just told 6 of my friends not to play the game that they showed up for.
Yeah.
And enjoy the story that was being told.
Right.
They didn't get to hear my narration.
No.
They didn't get to see Travis's reaction to his dreams.
Nope.
They didn't, they didn't get to feel that fear and trepidation of just being a fly on the wall in that, in that scene. Whether their characters were experiencing it or not.
Right.
You're robbing the players of that experience.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm worried about a little on Friday, but at the same time, I'm going to be recording it on a DAT recorder.
Sure.
And pasting it for the other group to be able to, the rest of the group to be able to listen, because I want them to be able to enjoy it if they want.
Well, also, I mean, that's a a 5-minute narration.
Right.
Versus we have to go finish an entire adventure with literally 2 people separated from hundreds of miles.
Right.
With no way to get to one another.
Right.
You would be having 3 of your players show up and literally sit there and listen.
Yeah,
So,
and in an ultra to that, which is the thing I did years ago with my 7C game, where I had one player who was having a dream sequence that everyone else was involved in. Actively got to play their characters as if it was a real thing, because it was basically future sight. It was divination that was going on. And then snapping back and restarting the session back as if they had just woken up and realized they had gone through the whole thing, and everyone played along with me on that.
Yeah.
And that felt so good to watch, and everyone loved it. Everyone was involved with it. And it's those types of moments that I always find, I guess, way more valuable, because everyone feels the tension of like, I am playing a part in something.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what you want. You want that engagement. You want that interaction. You want to sell it. I'm not saying you can do that every single time. And for God's sakes, do not unless it's exceptionally long, don't give your players NPC characters to play through a scene or 2 just to make sure that they're rolling dice and things. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, they're not invested in that character. That feels like filler work.
Right. So unless it's literally like their character's out of commission for a period of time and you want them to have some involvement and they're like, hey, do you mind if I play that NPC?
Yeah.
Sure. Hand it to them at that point. But don't give them a job.
Yeah.
Let them enjoy the situation and feel the drama of their character and the weight of what's going on, because it will change it.
Yeah.
I've seen way too many times like, oh yeah, whenever anybody's around, not around, or I split the party, I'll run it as 2 adventures, and anybody who shows up just gets one of my NPCs. That's like, so you give them a job.
Yeah.
Okay, that hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts me on a story level.
And like as a storyteller, that also, like, I can't imagine giving away one of my NPCs to somebody, because like all my NPCs have their own purposes and narration and stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't trust another person to play that NPC.
I did for part of my game, because I wanted a different voice. And I didn't think that for me it was like, I want this person to come from a point of so indifference that they're like, I remember you, but like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put that through.
Yeah.
And kind of, and I had even this villain set up to be somebody other than me.
Mm-hmm.
And the legitimate reason why I had a friend was going to be coming to play that character was because I wanted you to be able to kill that person without looking at me across the table.
I'll kill you.
I understand
No,
that.
that's fine. I will kill you. I have no problem with that.
I don't. The visceral point of connection there needed to be broken for me for a moment. We're obviously going to get through it on Friday, but that's then. But it was one of those things where I just needed that. I wanted to see what that break was going to be like for once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, this wasn't my BBEG. This is a quest villain, if you will, a side story villain, who has effectively very little weight in the overall story.
But he's my
but
BBEG.
he's your BBEG right now.
Yes.
So yes. So one of the other things that we had kind of kicked around, and it was something that I found the two of us kind of going back and forth on a little bit more, is the concept that, especially when you have the split party and you have consequences, not necessarily failures, it is nothing to say that you can't change the scene.
Yeah.
When a fireball comes into the room and is close to your players, you cut away. It's okay to go to the other group. And when you come back, the scene has changed.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in every movie, every TV show, every action flick. You see the people getting blown out the window into the water.
Yeah.
And then it cuts.
It's not so much of a keep the idle party involved as much as a get the idle party back together.
Mm-hmm.
You can take narrative leaps to get the split part of the parties past the split.
Yeah.
And I thought like a great example of that was going to be like, you know, you got like your party is fighting on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Half of them are fending off pirates or whatever above deck. And half of them are searching for a MacGuffin below deck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Someone throws a fireball. It does a large amount of damage. The storyteller decides to seize on this and say, okay, there's a massive explosion bigger than you thought was going to happen. And scene.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens? Do we roll damage? Did we done? Okay. It's 45 minutes later. The ship is still aflame, but most of it's sunk under the waves by now. The whole party, MacGuffin in hand, is rowing away on a rowboat right now. You've got what you came for, but the ship is lost and you are adrift at sea. Now what are you guys going to do?
Right.
You know? And it's dramatic. It takes a massive skip in the story, but it gets everybody back together, and it is suitably bombastic, I think, for a kind of fade to black situation.
Another one that came to me was the team, the crew kind of situation. If someone has a failure, maybe the security guy loses control of the system.
Sure.
There's nothing to say that one of the components, as the person, hands off things from the elevator shaft, falls away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay, now the elevator's taking them somewhere else. They're out of the scene. Like, removing components to get yourself faster to the finish, but without removing agency.
Yeah.
Let the plot agency continue. It doesn't mean that player agency and hard moves like that can't happen, but it's a consequence and domino effect. You're heightening the tension as it comes to the close.
Yeah.
And that's the other component that you want. You want that moment where the person has to make the decision between fighting the bad guy and just grabbing the skull and diving overboard. Mm-hmm. Grabbing that MacGuffin and diving overboard, and then looking at everybody else like, okay, did we get it? And he comes up out of the water with it in his hand. He's like, okay, we're good. And he gets pulled onto the other boat, and you row away, staring at the BBEG, who's still with the flames behind him, staring at you like, I'll get you next time. Like, this isn't over. And you're like, it is for the moment. Like, and those feelings can carry. Like, those stories can carry. And there's nothing to say, especially with, like, Savage World, that an interlude can't explain how you survived.
Sure. Like,
again, leave the blank space. It's there for story.
I've got 3 bennies. who wants to tell me the first part of the story of how you guys made it to shore and survived being adrift at sea?
Boom.
Who gets the next Benny?
Exactly.
Yep.
I applaud those kinds of moments. So it's about keeping the drama and the story and allowing for agency points, but not removing the reason why they're moving forward. They move the story forward.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a consequence, but they move the story forward.
You want to get to questions?
Of course.
Alrighty. So, Nevim, as usual,
Thank you.
Peppered us with questions. We have, when splitting the party, should all the players stay in the same room, even if their characters are not? Yeah, I think we covered this one.
I will
Absolutely.
say yes.
I absolutely want all of their participation. They're part of the game. Let them at least listen to the story out of character, even if they're not participating in character.
And one of the things that I was going to say that I forgot, and I'm glad the question came back up to remind me, was that often reintegrating them costs you more time and energy.
Yeah.
Because now you have to remember, they have to try and compare and put stuff together. And that can be very stressful.
You repeat yourself a lot less. If you're talking about, like, okay, you see a man walk in, he's got a big scar across his eye, blah, 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 blah. You give him a full description of this dude. And then in the next scene, when the character who wasn't present for that sees the same character, you can be like, you see this man with a scar over his eye. Oh, yeah, the guy who stabbed John. Cool. I know this. Right. I know. You already described him. I've already got a very visceral idea as a player what he looks like, so now I can put my character in that situation.
Yeah.
You don't need to describe him to me again.
Correct. Yeah. One of the best ways that I like about this is that by having them in the same room, the story becomes the players are part of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
When the bad guy tries to walk by someone who wasn't in the scene, they notice them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they walk by an NPC, it's the guy in the policeman's office, police officer's disguise, trying to sneak his way out of the police precinct. As he walks by all the NPC cops, they're busy worrying about somebody breaking out of their cell, not this guy. And then your investigator who's going to go talk to the chief about this guy kind of turns and looks at the one guy who's not doing what everyone else is doing. That's your player who wasn't part of the scene with the chief, who's now cuffed to his desk in his office.
Mm-hmm.
That it's that moment so that there's a different feeling to it. That's what makes them a character.
Yep.
So
we asked how to avoid having bored players when the party is split.
Investment.
Yeah, well, mostly investment. Mostly in focusing on entertainment. Keep things moving, keep them involved in the table talk and the conversation.
Making their actions meaningful across the line.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard. It doesn't always work out, but there are things you can do where they're interconnected. There are things you can do where jokes are interconnected. Like, dude, I would so want to punch him in there. Would you like some more punch? And you just cut and people are like, oh, that's cute. Nicely done. And things like that. It can sometimes bring it in. Again, it's not always easy to do that, but where you can find bridge points where they can connect across, or give advice or things like that keeps them involved in the story.
And then should I stop the players from splitting the party?
I mean,
I don't think it's ever a good idea to actively tell the players that they can't do a thing. That's where you start straying into railroading. I think sometimes, though, players overthink things. And there have been a couple times at my table, specifically, I have had to look a certain player in the eye and tell that player, who is looking very shifty and a little abashed right now in front of me, that,
I've gotten better.
We've been at this for an hour and a half, and your solutions to a very minor problem have escalated to maybe we should poison the city's water supply.
I did make that comment once.
And maybe we need to just wheel it back and realize that we have overthought this, and that the solution is much, much simpler. May I make a suggestion? These are the facts you are operating on right now.
All that being said, I'm going to take it from a different angle and say this. If you are a new storyteller, there is nothing wrong with looking at your group and saying, hey, I'm not comfortable being able to run a split party. I don't think I would do it well. Can you guys try not to do it this time for me? I'm new at this. That is okay. That is perfectly okay. You are going to make mistakes as a new storyteller. You are going to have things. And being able to be honest with your players and saying, I don't know if I can do this. Mm-hmm. And if I do it this way, you guys have to be patient with me because I'm really going to be struggling through this.
Sure.
But if they're confident, like, no, we want to do this for the story and we'll work with you, then take your first steps into it, toe into the water as softly as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
But communicate. Be honest. Be open about those feelings. You have the right to be scared stepping into that situation.
I think that's a great answer. All right, so Overwatch asks, some games, Shadowrun, are notorious for splitting the party even when they are together.
That is true.
Do you have any tricks for keeping the flow of the game and the table going in situations where you have stuff like 3 different groups of characters running parallel in 3 different realities all at the same time?
So sometimes you're a hacker in the Matrix.
Sometimes you're a shaman in the spirit world.
And sometimes you're a gun bunny cutting down a bunch of guards.
Yep.
The best way that I've ever seen it, and I will say it was Overwatch who did this, was running near linear moments. Now keep in mind that as a Matrix runner, you were running at about 6 times the speed in your actions that everyone else is doing.
Yep.
Spirit Realm tends to feel kind of ephemeral in its time in comparison to real time, but it's close to real time. It's near real time. Mm-hmm. Shadowrun has moved to AR, where basically like you're not jacking in like the Matrix and moving around. It is happening via windows in front of you and things, icons. So it's more linear in that space. The best thing that you can do, and like Overwatch did, and that is run near linear, is there's always a stage point where you can interact with each other. Mm-hmm. And that is where you make sure that those connections have meaning. It comes back to the crew design.
Yeah.
Crews,
yeah.
If you have a crew that is doing a crew job, there should always be a linear point where 2 people connect within the story. And it's knowing where those connection points are, whether it's the security expert who's opening a door for somebody that then opens that scene to the next person, or it's the spirit shaman who's watching for something that just the poltergeist to show up, and be available to be, pulled into reality enough to be injured. Mm-hmm. It's each one of those steps being prepared to be able to do the handoff.
Yeah.
And knowing that it has impact and meaning within the story.
For me, first off, all of that, yes. But for me, like my big thing is I tend to ramp up the bombast of my narration when I've got a split party, because I know the biggest battle that I'm fighting at the table is boredom. Mm-hmm. And people's attention's drifting. Yeah. So if I go into extra hyper performer mode, doing extra voices, giving more vivid descriptions of things, find an intense music track to back me, then chances are everybody at the table who ordinarily wouldn't be doing anything is now watching the spectacle. And they're into it.
No, that's 100% legitimate. I agree with that.
And so, even if it's only one person I'm narrating for, you make that scene the most interesting thing going on so that they don't drift.
Yep.
And then, when something does happen that's dramatic, your highs and your lows, everybody's feeling that the cheer, the despair, the impact of it. So.
Yep. So, one of the things that I read today, totally unrelated to this topic. I wanted to squeeze it in before our next week's topic discussion.
Yeah, right.
I was reading, I read it a couple weeks ago. Someone was talking about how do I make things feel Cthulhian, otherworlding, Lovecraftian.
Okay.
And the gentleman had, or the individual had talked about things like bring 2 indistinct descriptions together. The grass felt like teeth crunching under your feet with its tips. The water, like, The water like blood pooled and moved in globs. Darkness dripped from his body. like the shadow hadn't fully left him, even though the light shone upon his lacquered skin.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is an interesting way of doing it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
The concepts of taking something like that and making something feel truly an aberration, something that's unfathomable.
I would actually suggest reading some Lovecraft, with the giant disclaimer that he was a piece of crap racist,
Horrible writer.
But no. Well, no. Here's the thing. I don't think he was a horrible writer. I think he was a horrible racist, but I don't think he was a bad writer.
Okay.
From the standpoint of how he described things like that.
Oh, okay.
Now, mind you, he did often enough describe things as undescribable.
He would blabber at times.
There were times a lot he would blabber. He was very fond of his prose. But what I would say though is like the description he gave of this creature, come to known as a Byakhee,
okay,
was something that was not altogether a mole or a crow or an ant or a fetid human corpse, but something like, but not like those things.
Right.
And like, where you're like, well, it wasn't like those. But wait a minute, like,
right.
And your brain starts trying to reconcile what a crow crossed with an ant, crossed with a mole, crossed with a rotten human corpse would look like.
Let alone what it wouldn't look like.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Like, it's not any of those things, but you kind of get the general idea, is essentially how he described it. And you're like, oh, wow, that's messed up.
That in its own made people feel that he was a terrible writer. If you wrote about beauty and all you said, she was not ugly. She was not, she was not dark.
Not what he's getting at, though.
Right.
Like,
I'm with you.
The thing is, if he said it was like a crow, you could be like, oh, okay, so it had black feathers and a beak and wings.
Right.
But it didn't.
Right.
It had wings, kind of like a crow's, but like not, because they were fleshy and like a rotten human corpse, but again, it like wasn't humanoid.
Right.
It was more like a mole, but like didn't have the snout or the claws, you see.
Right.
It was more like an ant because of the mandibles and the,
Yeah.
like, it's not an ant, because an ant is identifiable, and that wasn't this.
Right. It was portions that were not of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not like he was saying it existed in the void between those things.
Right.
It's that he was saying that I want to make that comparison, but those comparisons are wrong, because those things would have been recognizable, and this thing is entirely different.
Right.
But these are literally the closest similarities I can almost try to tie to it without going insane.
Yeah, and what was interesting was that same person, because I found it in a different thread, where somebody was asking, like, I'm looking to do something otherworldly, like space otherworldly, but I want the feeling of, like, the Fae, where you're looking at it and your brain is trying to connect the dots, but it's just outside, so the best thing you can do is make a reasonable comparison. And the original poster had said, like the way people described angels, where no one got the description right, because there was no right description to be made.
Be not afraid. I said, be not afraid.
Yes, but it had 1,000 eyes upon its wings that were made of flesh, haloing its perfect head.
Yeah.
And you're like, or it's perfect features like upon Adam, which no one has met Adam. So he was like, okay, so I need something like that. And the same poster came back and said, you need to stop thinking. You need to think Cthulhian. You need to take it to another world and bring it back by 1 degree. You start off your statement with a statement. Unlike Cthulhu, where you're not defining anything. Your first statement should always be the truth, in the case of a Fae, or something that is fathomable that you're trying to connect your consciousness to. So, for instance, she was stunning. That's the first line. And then the next things after that should always be some things that just don't connect the dots to stunning. Like silver upon a freshly pewtered platter. how does that have anything to do with a woman? Okay, oh, she's shiny. Okay, so maybe that's what I'm excited. So that the person is filling in all the other details of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. So that the person who is sitting at the table listening to you to describe a fae, all they have is, she was gorgeous. And everything else is what they make of these odd descriptions that you attach to it.
Yeah.
And but they have a start point versus there is no start point.
Right.
There is just what it is not.
Yeah.
Like these things.
Yeah.
And it was just a very different way of looking at it. I'm like, okay, that is fantastic. Like that is the Otra, but at the same time, so along the same line frame. And I loved it. I loved seeing that. And it was like, Sarah needs to hear this. More people need to hear this. So, like we did last year, and through, I should say, last season, the second of the month is going to continue doing our system spotlights. And funny enough, this was not planned in any way. We decided we were going to do Worlds Without Numbers for our next episode. And strangely, we have Cities Without Numbers Kickstarter going off right now.
Yep.
We are not sponsored by that in any way. We have no idea what's going on there. It could totally stink. I doubt it.
So this is from the creator of Stars Without Number, Kevin Crawford. Wrote a fantastic game there. He's got Worlds Without Number now is the kind of fantasy analog to that, so we're going to be going over that. And then the Kickstarter we just mentioned, Cities Without Number, is going to be his cyberpunk style game, which just the Kickstarter I think just went live either this morning or last night or something like that.
Yeah, I'm probably when we get a bit more info on it, I may actually throw a bone out there to see if we can get some data on it, because I'm interested to see what the connection point is and how that's going to play through, or if it's just a continuation by name. You know. But I would love to get some information from that group and maybe do a micro teardown on it if we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I feel that's going to be months out at this point.
I want to get this in here at the tail end of our how to describe alien things with the heatsink. Sean coming in the live chat with the Douglas Adams quote: "They hung in the sky much like bricks don't."
Or the commentary of the potted plant.
Oh no, not again.
That again.
Yes.
Yeah, it's those kinds of moments. So, but yeah, hopefully next week we will shift into this and give you a little bit more fantasy now that we're stepping back to that realm, and keep these system spotlights going for you so that you guys can explore systems and enjoy them like we do.
Alrighty. Well, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to have you join the discussion there, talk to other great storytellers about your own campaigns, bounce ideas off them, shoot us some questions, join us in the live chat. We'd love to see you. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who help us out every single month, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet, Sam, The Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Veteran, Hula Vu, and Sean. We truly appreciate all your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems or on Instagram. I hope you go and check them out. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find them at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out as always for our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who sat with us at our tables over these years to give us great stories to share with you, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys.
Love you
so much.
Good
night.